Hey guys, welcome back to Top of the Chops. This is Joe Garrett from Veevar Guitar. This week our single is Rain by Aitch and AJ Tracey and it's produced by Tay Keith. Okay, let's get straight into it. So the whole idea of this song is very simple. We've got a piano riff that runs all the way through the song, and that's basically all we're going to be doing on the guitar. On top, I'm going to play some chords as well, just to show you kind of what you can use in that key, and the improvisation as well. We're going to use a certain scale, and even though this is really simple, the scale is not, and I'm going to get pretty heavy with the theory, but in terms of the piano riff, it's quite interesting. It's a very interesting melody. When I first hear songs like this, it makes me think of Phrygian or Phrygian dominant, but this is actually in Locrian, or some people say Locrian. I'm not sure how it's pronounced, but yeah, it's in that scale. So it's a UK grime track. It's got AJ Tracey on it and Aitch, and Tay Keith produced it, and the first time I heard of him was on Travis Scott's latest album. He did a song called Sicko Mode, which features Drake. It was massive all over the world. So to hear him on a UK grime track is amazing. Okay, let's get straight into it. So the first kind of riff is based around this A-flat Locrian mode. And those of you that aren't too clued up on your modes, it's the 7th mode of the major scale. So if you think of your major scale starting, let's say in A, if we start that but from A flat instead, it's a whole different sound. You know, it's really dark. Now, you've probably heard from other videos that I've done, or if you've learnt your modes and your harmonization of the major scale, the major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished. If you don't know that off by heart, it's really important to know. And it basically spells out all of the chords that will be in a key. So the key of this song is in A major, but because we start on an A flat, it makes it a mode, okay? So if we spell out that chord progression, major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished, the 7th note in that major scale, or the 7th chord, would be a diminished chord. And in A major, that would be A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G sharp, and then back to A. Okay, so really, rather than calling it A flat, we should be calling it G sharp. Okay, so apologies if I said A flat earlier. Okay, so G sharp would be a diminished chord, essentially. So our Locrian scale is going to sound very diminished. Okay, so if we play it, you know, it's very kind of dark sounding, and that is how the mode feels. Now, Phrygian is very similar. People sometimes confuse the two, and I did when I first heard the song. I thought it was in Phrygian until there's one note change towards the end, and I'll talk about that in a second. But our first note, you know, that kind of Jaws thing, that, you know, you got your root note to the minor second. You know, it's very Phrygian. Those of you that know your Phrygian scale will know that. But the note that really kind of changed my mind on it, or kind of solidified it as being Locrian, was this note here, the D. So in Phrygian, you'd have a D sharp. Okay, but because it's a normal D, it makes it Locrian, okay? Or a whole key is A major. But yeah, you'd think of it as A major, but resonate to your G sharp a lot of the time, okay? So I tend to think of things in the natural minor a lot of the time when I'm improvising. So when I play the track later on and you see me improvising over the top of it, most of the time I'm going to be around that natural minor shape. So the relative minor of A would be 6 notes up from that. So 1, 2. So F sharp. So a lot of the time I go to this F sharp here and do shape 4 of the natural minor. And I'd head into other shapes as well, but I'll usually kind of pick a shape that will be my home and then move around from there and just kind of dip into other shapes as well. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you the riff as it is, because that is basically the whole song all the way through. There's not much guitar in this song. Well, there's no guitar in this song. I'm basically going to play the piano riff on top, and then I'm going to show you some chords that you can use over the top of it. If you find yourself in this situation where you have a Locrian riff and you think, what chords am I going to put on top of this? So the riff, I like to put a bit of distortion on it, because if you actually play this riff on guitar, it sounds quite metal in a way, mainly because of the scale, but again, because you're playing it on a guitar. But we start off on G sharp. Okay, and we're going to go between that minor second, so the A, and then back to G sharp. And then up to our C sharp. And then we're going to jump up to A on the D string. And then back down to the G sharp on the low E string. And then the octave of that on the D string, so the 6th fret. So that first section goes, and I'm palm muting the whole thing. The piano, yeah, it's not really sustained, it's just kind of jumping between those notes. Okay, now if you were playing that cycle on its own, then you would probably be right in thinking that that is Phrygian. Now it's when this note, like I said earlier, the D comes in, and that is just kind of a alteration on the second half. So it goes. So instead of, so that 7, 4, 6, you go 7, 4, but on the D string, and then drop down to the D on the A string, 5th fret. So that whole cycle is. Okay, and you just basically repeat that. There's a lot of chops, as there is in a lot of hip hop and rap music. They'll chop certain sections out to make the vocals impact, and then they'll drop the beat in again. So the order of what section comes first and what comes second is kind of staggered and does happen randomly a lot of the time. But if you just think of it as one riff keeping rolling, like all of these have been, I've laid something down on a loop pedal and then shown you how you can improvise over the top of it or play the melodies. With this, it is a pure rap tune, so I'm not going to be playing any melodies on top, because it's all kind of, as rapping is, it's quite monotone. Unless you have kind of the rap singing thing like I did with maybe Roses by St. John on the last video. I'll put that in the description at the end, by the way, and you can listen to that. That was last week's one. And this single is number 3 again. It's, you know, 3rd in the charts at the minute, but I've already done the other 2 in other videos. So as per Top of the Chops, I will do whatever is the highest at the time for a song that I've not done before. Okay, so back to this, we're going to look at the chords on top of the riff now, and then I'm going to show you a loop pedal version with me improvising over the top of it. So the chords that I've worked out, I tend to kind of pick notes from the scale and use my ear a lot of the time. So if I have, let me make a loop of this actually real quick. So it's so I want a G sharp chord just to play at the beginning, because that's where the riff starts and it's where it ends. It's kind of your home basically in terms of the mode. But I don't know what chord to use to begin with. So I kind of use my ear and I'll play around. Does it sound cool with a minor? Does it sound cool with a major? And the truth is, it kind of sounds cool with a major, interestingly. So. Cool, so you can hear that sound. And it does work, but what I wanted to do was show you how you can take the notes from the scale that you're using and spell out a chord, just for something a bit more kind of jazzy and interesting, and something that is very Locrian. Okay, so what I did was I took the root note of the scale, and I've got my octave here as well, but also I added this note on top, which would essentially be the octave of your D, okay? And that's spelling out a lot of notes that are in the scale that I'm using. So we get a, which I guess would be, what would that be? That would be a G sharp, sus sharp 4 with no 5. Or, I mean, it kind of sounds cool with the 5 in it, so I think I'll probably do that as well. Okay, I know it kind of contradicts, you know, the notes in the scale, because in the scale you wouldn't have that D sharp, but you know, some rules are made to be broken. But if we're thinking of it completely Locrian, then yeah, we've got our G sharp, our octave, and then essentially it's 2 notes, which would be a sus sharp 4, because there's our sharp 4 there, G sharp and a D. And then the next note, we go to a major. So it resolves it to that key, essentially. So I'm basically going between those 2 chords there. And because on the riff we're going, you know, that C sharp there is the major third of the A, so it goes really nicely when you go to the A chord. You know, that kind of tension in the first note because of the sharp 4, and then resolving it back to the major chord. It was lovely. And then on the last chord I decided to do something different, just to switch it up so we weren't just going between 2 chords each time. And I did a D major 9. Okay, and if you look at all of those notes in the chord, they all fit in the scale. So the D, obviously that accents that, you know, Locrian note there, and then that note's in the scale. That's your 4th. All of those notes are basically in the chord, and I just landed on it. I landed on that D chord and thought, what voicing of that chord would work really nice over the top. And if you hear it against the riff, we've got, it's just kind of a nice, pleasant ending to that cycle before it goes back to that tension again. And Locrian is tension, basically. It's that diminished chord in the key, then resolve into your A. Okay, so I basically laid that on top of the riff, and that was my thinking behind the chords and how I would pick certain chords over the top of that riff. And then in terms of improvising, when you see the video in a second, I'm basically doing what I said earlier, taking that F sharp natural minor, and then maybe going down to an A major sort of shape here. Yeah, dipping in between a few shapes. Also, there's a kind of lick I caught myself doing where I'm tapping a note here, so on a bend, which is quite nice. Not necessarily specific to this scale or anything, I would do that in other things, but when I'm bending up that 10th fret on the B string, I know I've got my 12 and my 14 there, so I can tap the 12. because essentially that's going to be a 14th fret. And then when I resolve it, you get a nice sort of release. Oh, yeah, not a, you don't want a D sharp. So yeah, lots of legato, that kind of thing. But you'll see when I'm playing, just to get an idea of the style. Okay, let's have a look. Thanks so much for watching. Tune in next week for another Top of the Chops.